Comic Book Savant, episode 469. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, we're going to be doing an episode of Countdown, and I'm going to be counting down my favorite DCEU movies in order of my least favorite to favorite. We just recently had Birds of Prey come out in theaters, so I thought it would be cool to kind of refresh and revisit this list. I know in a couple of months we're going to have Wonder Woman 1984 come out, so I might revisit it again after that movie and do a new ranking. Not quite sure. The one movie I will not include because it's not a part of the DC extended universe, which is the Joker. I actually will be having a review of that coming up shortly on the podcast. I finally got the movie in my possession. I just need to sit down and watch it and get everything together for a review. So that will be coming down the road at some point. But with all that being said, before we get into this episode, I do like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. It's a great place to go if you like the content that I create here and you want to find more of it and find more comic book related content. It's a great one-stop shop to find that content. So if you have a moment, stop by the Comics Podcast Network. And again, you can find them over at comicspodcast.com. Now, with all that being said, let's get into the episode. When I look at these movies, we have at this point, 8 films released kind of under what we were presented originally as the DCEU. They call it multiple different things now. They've changed the terminology. I still call it the DC Expanded Universe or Extended Universe, whatever. Broken down DCEU is what I stick with because it's what works for me for talking purposes. So that's what I go with. For me, the number 8 or the last spot, my least favorite of the DCEU movies would have to be Suicide Squad. This movie just was a jumbled mess. I like aspects of it. I loved Will Smith's performance as Deadshot. I love Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn in this movie. I wasn't offended as most people by Jared Leto's Joker characterization in the film, and really thought it was a missed opportunity or where they went with the movie. Excuse me, not making him the major villain. But a lot has, came out since that movie was released about, David Ayer, who wrote and directed the movie, how he only had 6 weeks to write the script, how he went back and changed a lot of aspects on him. We saw a lot of footage that was done and shot between Margot Robbie and Jared Leto's Joker that essentially got cut out of the movie. It was a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, when it came to that movie that hampered the movie. But I think the standouts were like Viola Davis, in the movie, Will Smith and Margot Robbie were like the huge, standouts in the movie. Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, really, kind of worked. I wasn't even mad at Jai Courtney's comedic kind of turn as Captain Boomerang, and it's cool to see that he's gonna come back in the sequel. Or again, that's a whole nother conversation, I guess, for another day when it comes to that, how they're handling is it the reboot or is it a sequel, but aspects they're touching on. It's really again more of a jumbled mess, which I'll speak on towards the end of this about my opinions kind of where DC films are right now, and and it's a lot of upheaval across the board. It just seems like with DC right now as a company, DC Films, DC proper. We had Dan DiDio just recently stepped down from as co-publisher of DC Comics. We've had so many structure changes to DC Films and who's running in it. It doesn't really seem like they have a firm grasp on what they're doing with these films, and it kind of plays out I'll talk about each movie in more detail, that it kind of mirrors or echoes some of those same sentiments, that they really haven't uh, picked the direction and really have put their stake down in the ground and like just lean into it. Maybe we'll see that change in the future, but it remains to be seen. Next up for me, my number 7 movie would be Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. I think this edged out Suicide Squad just by a little, but I feel like both movies are very similar. Uh, I don't know far as I mean, this movie was just released, so we haven't heard much about the production of the film. I do know one thing, that they did bring in Chad Stahelski, which he originally started as a stunt coordinator. Then him and his partner Leach, David Leach? I want to say David Leach. They co-directed the first John Wick movie. They split for after that. Stahelski has directed all the subsequent John Wick movies, has built quite a name for himself. He was brought in because, of course, his prowess with action from the John Wick movies and years of being a stunt guy and stunt coordinator. I mean, he goes all the way back to The Matrix, with the stunts, being one of the stuntmen and stunt coordinators on that. So he's been in and around the business for a long time. They brought him in to punch up the action scenes from in Birds of Prey towards the end, because they felt like the fight scenes were lacking. And he did a good job with that. But, I think the narrative was, this wasn't ever a Birds of Prey movie. It was always a Harley Quinn movie, more so than a Birds of Prey. So even when it came down to the naming convention and all that, and with all the movies that they kind of had being battered around at the time after Suicide Squad came out, it was rumors about a Joker Harley Quinn movie. Got Gotham City Sirens, which I felt like if they were going to do a movie similar to this film probably would have worked better as that. But I guess with other plans that they had with using Catwoman in the Matt Reeves Batman movie and things like that, and different things that were being shuffled, and so many things being announced and thrown out there, that they felt like this was a better property to go with. I really just would have rather it have been a totally Harley Quinn movie. And if we were introduced with the characters of Birds of Prey, as you start setting them up for maybe a DC Universe show or HBO Max show, that kind of would work better, because that's essentially what this movie is. It's a Harley Quinn vehicle with Birds of Prey sprinkled in more as a supporting cast than as actual co-stars of the movie. And I think that's what hurt the movie the most, that and them shooting for the R rating. I think they were trying to get that try to mimic what was done with Deadpool with Harley Quinn in this film, and it just didn't work. I think it should have went for how popular Margot Robbie has become as the character. The movie would have benefited more if it would have been for more general audiences, because a lot of young girls love her as as that character, and you wanted as many people to have access to the film as possible. And I think with very little editing, that movie could have been easily a PG-13 instead of being a rated R movie. But again, it doesn't make sense. The certain changes were made, and I've already done a detailed review about the movie and expressed my thoughts. I'm not going to repeat them all here, but a lot of mistakes were made with that movie. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I wasn't like a movie that, oh my God, it was such a waste of time, or I regretted seeing it. I enjoyed it for what it is. I will own it like I own all the movies on this list. And I would watch this, and this is where I said it edged out Suicide Squad for me, because I would actually, I don't know the last time, if ever, I went back and watched Suicide Squad. I know I own it. It's in my collection. I just wouldn't be a movie I would go back and rewatch. This was fun enough where I would go back and rewatch this movie or have it playing in the background while I was doing other stuff and could enjoy it. Not so much with Suicide Squad, so that's why I edged it out for me. Um, Next for me was this number 6 would be Shazam. I talked about this as well when I reviewed the film. Is that I thought it was great world building done. Um, but just this movie, like at points, it had lulls in the film, and I think it was another thing too of too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, with this film. Knowing that you had a director in David F. Sandberg that came from horror, you could tell they had him tone down certain aspects that he wanted to do, like with the sins and what have you, where he did really like kind of horrific takes that were kind of a little dark, and was surprisingly dark what they did with it. The tones were off and inconsistent throughout the film, and I wish they just would have kind of let him lean into what worked well for him as a director and played into his strengths more than what they did. But I love the world that they built in the film, and I'm glad they finally announced that they're gonna do a sequel. Hopefully they give him more leeway in the second film, for sure. But I left that film as not one of my favorite out of these DCEU films. But like I said, it was enough there that got me excited to see where, if given a chance, which I'm glad we do now, know that it's going to be more to come. That I can't wait to see where it's going to go next. So I'm definitely excited for the future of the franchise, and then we do know now Black Adam is coming, and it should be some crossover with things that were set up in this film that will probably make the third film really awesome, because by that point we'll have Shazam, and I can't remember which one comes out first, Black Adam or Shazam 2, but I think they're a few months apart from one another, so it's definitely going to be setting up this world even more, and it's going to bolster what the third movie is going to be, which I think could be a really, really awesome. Okay, let's see. Next film for me is going to be Justice League. We all had our feelings about Justice League and and how it ended up. Um, it was just uh, a bomb. I mean, there's so much stuff that went wrong with this movie. No need to talk about that. Again, like a certain aspects of it were okay. It was just such a disappointment. But it was some great scenes. It was great seeing everyone put together. I loved the aspects of like Cyborg and his like backstory, the bits we got, and um, seeing all of it finally coming together. It's a shame we probably will never get that Ray Fisher Cyborg movie that they announced way back when. You remember that? When they made that big, here's our slate of upcoming movies that we'll never get. Yeah, that was the thing. So, that's disappointing, because I really liked that actor and thought he was like the unsung hero of that movie, but we'll never probably get to see that at all. Maybe, it was rumors going around in the multiple drafts and things that was going on with the Flash movie. At one point, they were going to try to incorporate him into that and do like a buddy cop kind of film. We have no idea what the Flash movie is going to be whenever that does finally come out, if it ever comes out. I don't know. They announced it's back on and has a date, but it has had all that before, and it's had multiple directors being on and off of it and different writers on and off of it. So I won't hold my breath on that. But it was certain aspects that were very promising of Justice League that just never came to fruition, and it was kind of sad because I felt like they rushed to that film, and I wish they would have built up the characters individually before they did that movie. But we got what we got with that. Next for me is Wonder Woman. I spoke on this movie ad nauseum plenty of times before. I think my biggest issue with Wonder Woman, I love that movie. I just think the third act kind of fails the movie and, becomes this too much CGI, and it lost a lot of heart in that final act of the movie, which takes it down a notch for me. But I love Gal Gadot in the role. She really made it her own. And I hate to say it, but from what I've seen in trailers and so forth of Wonder Woman 1984, where people are really hype about it, I'm not. I don't know if I'm going to like the movie. I remain open to it, but the trailers that they've released to this point hasn't done anything to excite me the way the trailers for this film did at all. So I hope they nail it. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. So time will tell, I guess, is what it comes down to. Next movie for me is Aquaman. I think Aquaman ranks this high in the list for me just based on I am a kid of the 80s and 90s, coming into direct-to-home video films and releases. This movie's unapologetic. Me and James Wan are around the same age, and I think we like the same thing when we were kids, because this is unapologetically like a 90s action, straight to DVD, home video kind of movie. This is a movie that you would see like, what was his name? Where you would see Cynthia Rothrock and what was the guy? I think his name was Norton. I can't remember what his first name was that would do those direct. They were the American martial artists over in doing a lot of Japanese like action movies, and they just used to be just fun. Or back in the day, like even with Eric Roberts with like Best of the Best, even though I think that came out in the theater in that series of movies, they were just in that realm of unapologetic 90s action movies, fun. On the scale of a Sylvester Stallone movie like a Cobra or Tango and Cash, or Arnold Schwarzenegger with Commando, Red Heat, stuff like that from that 90s and late 80s, early 90s kind of action movies. And it was just fun. It was bright. It was bombastic. And it was just the overall fun time at the movies. And I I enjoyed it for what it was. It was unapologetic in that it was very aware of what it was, and it embraced it and did it well for me. It didn't connect with certain people as it did with me. It wasn't the best, but it was, I think, the funnest, I could say, of the films on this list. I think when I look at it, I think of it as the funnest of the films. Next for me is Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and I have to make this specific edition, the ultimate edition of the film. It is a longer cut of the film. I do not feel, if I ranked it based on theatrical versions, this movie would not be my second on the list. But if you watch the ultimate edition, all the stuff you wondered about, they did shoot, they kept in the movie, and it is there, and it makes for a much better movie. And it plays into, of course, if you can't figure out now what my number one pick is, which my favorite overall DCEU film is Man of Steel. I'm not a huge Superman fan. I like the darker, more realistic take on Clark and on Superman in this film. I think that Zack Snyder had a definitive vision of the arc of seeing we were going to start with this darker kind of Superman, and then through the story he was trying to tell, we were going to get that transformation. And what we eventually got that was so jumbled and fumbled in Justice League, then it was going to, lead into this evolution of more of the traditional Superman character that we had, that Christopher Reeves kind of Superman. It was supposed to happen through a series of movies, which just was handled and fumbled wrong by the studio, more so than Zack Snyder, because they cut a lot of his stuff. They cut basically all the Henry Cavill stuff. They shot a lot in Batman v Superman, and it really plays out to me as one super long cut of a movie that is the story. If you put Man of Steel, the theatrical version of Man of Steel, and you line that up with Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition, which I think is like an hour longer. So it's like 3.5 or some odd hours. I think, if I can't remember the exact runtime, but it's at least an hour longer. Um, yeah, it's a thing. So I think it makes for one good long continued narrative that those two movies together strengthen each other, and that's why they're my one and two picks on my list. Um, Back to what I was stated earlier. That's my countdown list. Now let's just briefly talk about where we're at with the DC films and kind of what direction they're going in. We've seen offshoots of we have far as things that we had come out. We had Joker, which is a whole nother thing that is not connected. We have now what's filming. We have the Batman, the Matt Reeves film. We don't know if it ties into the DCEU at all. We have Suicide Squad that's shooting. We don't know how it fits into the continuity of the DCEU. They're saying, it's a reboot of sorts, but then you're bringing back Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn she acknowledges that she already knows Captain Boomerang and that she was incarcerated. They touch very heavily on Birds of Prey on the first Suicide Squad movie. So if you announced it when you brought in James Gunn that this was going to be a reboot, how's it going to be a reboot? We know she's back. She's been on the team before. We know she knows Captain Boomerang because they put the Easter egg of a wanted poster of him on the wall, and she says, I know him. And they reference so heavily that movie and all the events with her and the Joker and all that kind of stuff. So that's a whole nother confused thing. They said Wonder Woman 1984 is not a direct sequel. It's a standalone thing. So I'm just confused as a fan where and how all this kind of fits together. I just take each film as it is, and I guess we'll determine where it is by each movie and how they connect or reference one another. That's all we can kind of do at this point. So that's all I'm going to do as a fan. I'm not going to think about it too hard because it might make my brain explode if I do. But that's all I really have for you. It's still so much to figure out, and they still haven't pinpointed, I feel like, a real direction. Maybe we'll get clarity when Wonder Woman comes out, since that's the next movie. Birds of Prey did not do anything to clarify the direction things are going. It still just seems all over the place as normal. So maybe we'll get some clarity, at that point come the summer. Time will only tell. But I'm down for it. Like I said, I've enjoyed all the movies. I have them in my collection. I have them where I would revisit and watch them all. Just some carry more weight than others for me. So, it'll be fun to see as the summer plays out and when that release comes out, how it, maybe we get some indication of the future of the DCEU. But that's all I have for you guys for this episode. As always, if you like the content I'm creating, you want to help support the channel, check out the Patreon. It is patreon.com/comic book savant. Also, I do have merchandise now. If you guys haven't seen it, I've posted on Instagram. We have 3 new t-shirt designs in the original OG logo that you see in all the signage and stuff for the podcast. You can pick those up if you go to comicbooksavant.com, click on the store link. It takes you right into the Teespring store. It's t-shirts, it's hoodies, stickers, mugs. It's going to be more merch coming out. I'm starting to conceptualize what the next wave of merchandise is going to be. So if you want to support the show in that way and get some really cool high quality merchandise, check out the store. Again, just go to comicbooksavant.com. All the links to everything that I talk about, Facebook group, the Patreon, if you want to check that out, all the social media links, all that kind of stuff, and all the content via, if it's a YouTube videos, any content that I release is all linked back on at comicbooksavant.com. That's your one-stop shop, or home base for everything Comic Book Savant. You can just go to the website for that. Again, that's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys have a good week. Until next time, you guys stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.